Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the LinkedIn Live event. We will give you a few more seconds for people to join. I hope we just want to give you a little bit of heads up so you're all geared up for our actual live event today. This is going to be a very interesting conversation with Suresh. Um, so it's going to be wonderful. So I would give a minute or so for people to join in. So please make sure that you stay for the whole course. We have some exciting conversations of fireside chat getting ready. And you can ask any of your questions on the LinkedIn, and we will take it up as and when it comes over. We also have a short demo that has been planned. So we have something about SRE in practice, right? And it's going to be a fun way of looking at things on board, right? So I hope you will take the advantage of being with us in the next 1 hour. And we promise to make this session more lively, more interactive, and more practical. And so with that, we will get kick-started. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us in this LinkedIn Live event scheduled for the Wednesday. Today is 13th of April. I'm your host, Suresh GP. I manage TaUB Solutions as a managing director. I'm also the DevOps Institute ambassador and co-author of the SRE Practitioner course. So I'm pretty excited to have with me Suresh Mathew, founder and CEO of Sedai, joining us all the way from Silicon Valley. Thanks, Suresh, for taking time today to be with our viewers, to sharing your insights on the journey with SRE. How are you doing today?
I am doing well, Suresh. Thank you so much for asking. It's really fun to really call the same name in both windows. So that's interesting. My first fireside with another Suresh.
Sure.
So my name is Suresh Mathew. I was at eBay PayPal for 13 years.
Yeah.
Handled infrastructure, SRE, and platform teams. Left my job in 2019 to start Sedai. Now, Sedai there were a lot of AI ops companies in play, and there are still successful, very good companies with awesome value, right? So they create value, and there is no point in being in that market because it's a very interesting market. Where we landed was a very different market, which is an autonomous field.
Right.
So that's a fun journey. It has been a fun journey. Closed our Series A recently. Moving to the next phase.
Excellent. So Suresh, let's get started off with the first question, because our topic for today is around optimizing SRE production environment with autonomous systems. But before we get into that specific topic, just to get our viewers a common understanding about it, what do you think as site reliability engineering trends in the market today? I mean, you said you have been managing a lot of these from a previous experiences. So where do you think this SRE journey is? I mean, is it a hype curve? Is it actually gone through that hype curve? And we're seeing some real progress with companies worldwide implementing and progressing towards site reliability engineering.
Yeah. In fact, great question. Before getting to that question, let me just tell me my perspective on what exactly is that role, right?
Sure.
They are either very good operations people who are extremely strong in software, or a software engineer who is extremely strong in operations, right? So that blend is the hardest to find. That is why it is a very rare commodity. That's why it is hard to find SREs.
Right.
Now, trend-wise, I think first and foremost changes. Now it's all about adopting everything. Adopt, and adopt. Right. Okay. So you always look in the market, you always look at solutions out there and see if that fits. That's one. Then there is an interesting trend coming up, which is called ESRE, where SREs are being shifted from being a central organization to the teams themselves.
Okay.
Right. So that's another thing. And this is my perspective on things. Like shift left and shift right were two great movements. Right. Now, when you look at left and right, we have been moving stuff left and right. If you really look at it, let's say configuration as an example. it was always on the right where production was changing. They said, let's move it to the left. But now developer does not know a lot about production.
Correct.
It's just that it's not done in production. It's not done in a better place.
Correct.
Right. So you have to find, when you move, you have to find the best place for the thing that is being moved. So I believe some of these configurations has to just go away. It should not be shifted right or left. They have to just go away.
Right.
I think there are a lot of stuff coming up, like self-healing platforms that's going to do that.
Right.
So that's another thing that's happening. GitOps is huge. DevSecOps is huge. And in general, everything in production will be handled by SREs, and reliability is like a key metric for companies these days.
Excellent. So I think you talked about a very important points, Suresh, and I'll just share my perspectives on what I see in the market. The first and foremost thing, which is good news for SREs, is one of the top most jobs in LinkedIn. So people are hunting for site reliability engineering jobs.
Yep.
The other aspect around site reliability engineering is organizations are also constantly evolving the support model. If you look at after going live to production, we have seen people traditionally focus on L1, L2, L3 support. Now they are trying to look at how is my support model going to change towards an SRE model. That's been a big shift, kind of a paradigm shift that we are seeing in the industry, where people want to look at, as you rightly said, reliability and resilience being a much more focused area. But also with the advent of application modernization, we are looking at immutable infrastructures. The ability to do self-healing and auto-remediation becoming a lot more important. And people are going beyond just being reactive to proactive to predictive. I think that predictiveness is, going to be a big joy. But that you did talk about something on AIOps. Do you think that is AIOps going to be a buzz around that predictiveness, or where do you think that play a role? Because most of the times our clients are talking about how do you reduce the number of incidents, and what can you do to make sure that we are able to predict the incident before it happens. So is there any thought around that space that you see happening combined with SRE?
Sure. This is where things get interesting, right? So if you look at AI and ops, especially ML and AI, right, these two technologies have failed us for the last 15 years.
Right.
And we all should be kind of ashamed of that, right? It has been failing because it has been trying to do things that system should be not doing. For example, if you try to look at an alert and try to execute on it, that's an alert that humans should probably be looking at. Right? Correct. So now when you try to do stuff that you're not super good at, the problem is you will essentially do something that's not that super useful. Right. That is where I think now companies are building things that are limited in capabilities using AI and ML. It's really placing it in the right place. I'll always take this example of Tesla, right? If Tesla had ever imagined to build a car that can take a person from place A to place B, they will still be a white paper. You will not see a Tesla on the road. The reason why you said Tesla on the road is because they realize that lefts and rights are easier. That can be autonomous, that can be learned, and it can be safer than humans. But the higher order decisions have to be left. So AIOps tools, the new generation of AIOps tools are going to really change the industry. That's my take on that. Absolutely. But the current tools, the Datadogs and the Neuralix and such, they are extremely valuable and they are doing what they are supposed to do.
Right. And you said about SRE getting popular, and there's no doubt about the number of job opportunities and places to do that. But you did talk about a skill set. I'm just going back to that skill set. So it's very hard to find that breed, right? Which is having both the understanding of the development landscape along with operations mindset and experience. So are you seeing SREs being homegrown these days, or kind of being brought in from different part of the world? I mean, how do you think that are we going to address the skill gap or talent gap as we start to gain more people in this whole, conversations around SRE?
Yeah, in fact, I think there are three aspects that generally organizations look for when they build an SRE team, or for that matter, any highly effective operations teams, right? Or production teams. It is skill set, tool set, and mindset.
Right.
Right. Skill set is one aspect, and it's very important for SRAs. It's extremely important that you have that analytical skills to figure out if there is going to be an issue or there is an issue and how to fix. You have to have the right mindset to collaborate with everyone,
Yeah.
and you cannot build everything. It's
Yeah.
as simple as that. It's extremely hard to build everything. You have to pick the right tool set that you can operate with. So those are the three things that are equally important for that team. I think the one team where it's all three are critically important as SREs, because developers can probably survive with good analytical skills only.
Right.
They may be slow, but an SRE cannot live without all these three.
Awesome. That's a right thing. I think I like the word called skill set, tool mindset, and tool set. Thanks. Anand says that interesting. Anand Narula says interesting conversation. Thanks for discussing this hot topic. So that's great to hear. People are finding it useful. So we are kicking it up in the right fashion. So let's go to the third one. So one of the things SRE is like, I always say that you are in a hot seat, right? Things are going to break then and there, and people are going to be coming in to address this whole thing quickly. So what are some of the common challenges that you have seen that the SREs are facing predominantly in a production environment where, it's always an uphill battle that you cannot just do. There are some unplanned outages, and it's a nightmare, frankly speaking, that, if a day goes without any escalations. I still remember I used to be 10 years in operations. If there was no escalation, I'll say, is everything okay? I didn't receive any escalation. So what is your take on some of the common challenges you see that's been haunting site reliability engineers?
Yeah. In my mind, in the modern cloud environment, I categorize it into, again, three. Right. The first one is really the microservices in play.
Right.
You had only 100 services to deal with. Now you have thousands of services to deal with.
Right.
Not just for large companies like the Googles and the large banks and PayPals and those guys. Now for startups as well, they have more than 500 services. That's very common. So dependencies, the changes that's coming in, all those are hard. The second aspect is the innovation velocity demand in the market. If you are a company in 2022, I don't think people release every quarter or every month anymore. They release almost every day or every minute. Sometimes I heard AWS, I read somewhere that AWS releases every 1.2 seconds.
11.2 seconds.
Yeah, see, that's hard. When you're changing a code, and when the code is really young in production, it is hard to really manage it with the highest reliability possible. So that's the second problem. The third aspect is you can never be late, right? So SRE is the biggest problem is when there is an incident, the first on the spot is SRE, and you have to be on time, which means you have to find the right alerts for the system to call you.
Correct.
Now, alerts have a huge problem. If you try to set a super non-aggressive alert, it'll take its own time. But if you make it super aggressive, it'll wake you up all the time. The problem with waking you up all the time is you start ignoring.
Correct.
So this is a vicious cycle. So there is absolutely no way you can land a good threshold.
Correct.
In the sense, now you have to always be 24 hours available. So that's a problem. That's the third challenge that I see for SREs. But the good thing is now companies have realized this as a problem and they've started fixing bits and pieces of everything. Now, if you find the right tool sets and pick each of them, I think you will solve the problem. But one thing I have to say, so I was talking to the Google search SRE head, Sai, in one of the last weekend. I was asking him, how do you really hire? So he was telling me the same thing. If you are planning to make something better, a service, hope is not going to be the answer. You have to measure and fix, right?
Exactly.
First, measure and take necessary steps to fix. It could be steps that you are doing in your environment. It could be steps that you are probably adopting from outside. But That is the deal, and it's an extremely interesting job. And what they sign up for is really the IQ tasks, right? The if you look at the pyramid,
Right.
the good tasks, the fun tasks, the IQ tasks at the top, that's what they sign up for. But what they end up doing is really the things at the bottom.
Correct.
Right? Because you are almost always firefighting. That's not interesting at all.
Correct. Absolutely. One of the LinkedIn users says, rightly said that SRE is all about skill set, mindset, and the tool set. There's one more question that comes from Anand Narula. Speed versus reliability. Can you talk a little bit about the same? As you said, we need fast releases in 2022. Obviously, it impacts the stability as systems are always changing. So is it fair to say that organizations are making a conscious choice to take a hit on reliability and focusing more on speed to market? That's a great question.
In fact, it's an awesome question. I would probably say it is both a conscious choice and they are kind of helpless at that point. There was no choice. Because if you were to win the market, the only way for a company to survive is being innovative.
Right.
You stay stagnant for a week, you will be out of the market.
Correct.
Right. So they have to do it. So if they were to run the business, they have to do it. So the only option for them is to have a system that can help them do this.
Correct.
Now the deal here is the way to balance it is have a system that can validate every release that's coming into production. And I truly mean it. Because you miss one change and you are in trouble.
Correct.
The way to do that is maybe not just using processes, but using systems as well.
Right.
That's a good thing about an autonomous system, right? It has to see everything if it were to operate. Correct. Which means it has a smart gate in your production. It evaluates everything that goes through, because when there is an incident, it has to figure out, is it because of that service or something that went through this gate?
Sure.
So the answer to that innovation is not really more automation. That's where I want all of us to think about autonomous as a solution.
Right.
Right?
No, that's...
Sorry. The key difference between an automated system and an autonomous system is these autonomous systems can be blamed. That's a negative word, but that's what it is, right? All other systems, let's say there's an alert and the alert was wrong and you scaled up. If the alert was wrong, the ownership is still on the SRE. Correct. If the action was wrong, the ownership is again back on the SRE or the developer. Now, if you look at it, what the system does is sit in the middle and blame both these two guys. I will do the action, but you said what to do, when to do. Sorry, when to do, and you said what to do. Correct. And when to do is wrong, yeah, you wrote it. If what to do is wrong, again, yeah, you asked me to do this. You have to have an autonomous buddy that can take this noise away. Correct. That can sit there in production and say, you know what, when I see small things, I can take that action. Lefts and rights is mine. And I take the responsibility. I learned.
That's a huge relief. That's a huge relief if you look at an SRE that, oh, I'm not going to be beaten to death, because one of the concepts that we always talk about is blameless postmortem. But you know that these whole candidates are inviting blameful postmortem, right? Because you are in that sandwich positions that whether you take the left or right, you're going to be beaten to death. So I'd rather kind of close my arms and say, you know what, I'm just going to hold on because this is not getting anywhere. But if I have an autonomous system that takes that ownership and says, don't worry, I'll take care of it, all the noise, and I will let you know if there is anything that you need to do. So
exactly. Exactly. And it'll only do the lefts and the rights. There is absolutely no way one can build a system that can ever replace anyone.
Correct.
And if you have that job, I think you should lose that job. In my mind, seriously. I don't think SREs are holding that job at all. There is absolutely no way you can replace that IQ job. But there's a lot of thinking there. If a network outage happens, there are 10 signals coming in. A system cannot decide, cannot act. That's a huge decision. If there's a deal out there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think the next, following on that question that you really explained the difference between automated and autonomous system, how do you eliminate, not just reduce, right, the cold starts for your serverless function? Because today with Lambda, we are talking about serverless function and stuff. So how do you how do you think is the best approach to reduce those?
It's a great question. Okay, so this is where I think this is a good example where I can tell you the difference between an autonomous system and an automated system.
Okay.
If you look at the cold start, it has been there for the last 10 years.
Right.
10 years, and the problem is still there. Search for the most searched keyword in serverless, it is cold starts. Right? And there are multiple solutions out there.
Right.
They will all reduce it because this is a problem that needs constant attention.
Correct.
And they know the path to fix it too, which means you should have a intelligent system, in the sense a learned system that can act. This is a classic example of an autonomous system fixing it and an automated system fixing parts of it. Right. That's why this 10 years it has been there. 2013 start they released, and 2022 they still have cold starts. AWS Lambda.
Yeah.
So the way we resolve it is, and the Sedai resolves it is, and we don't deal with the symptom, we resolve it.
Correct.
We always keep it in a way that you will have requests coming in without that initial hurdle. So there are some IP stuff in between that will figure this out. But the idea here is when it goes down, we'll get the notification and we will make sure that comes back up. In other words, it always stays warm.
Correct.
Right? So that's how we solve it. And that solves it forever. You will never see a spike.
Correct. Absolutely. So the next question is managing Kubernetes and serverless function at scale autonomously, because that comes in the part to do it. By the way, before that, there's a message from Anand saying that thanks for echoing my thoughts. Survival of organization and innovation first, and unfortunately, technology need to catch up with innovation. Awesome insight. So I think people are enjoying those conversations. So coming back to that question, Suresh, managing Kubernetes and serverless functions at scale autonomously, would that be a big ask, or how do you see that being dealt easily? Because everybody starts to think about, everything is going well, but as it starts to scale up, will we see some downward performance? And, basically, if you look at an SRE's role, they're all focused on customer experience. We talk about service level objectives. We are focusing on the entire customer journey map. So it's becoming critically important when we talk about these elements of how are we going to manage this this aspect. So what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So Kubernetes, if you look at the platform, that's really a declarative technology where you had imperative mechanisms before, and now they moved to declarative technology, and it works pretty well.
Right.
It's done by the best company in the world, in other words, right? So it works well. And serverless took it to the next level and said, you know what, you don't even worry about the infrastructure. You don't have to declare anything. I got this.
Correct.
The problem with this too is, or the challenge with this two technologies is, one, it is very easy or easier for developers to deploy stuff into production or create things in production.
Right.
Now that makes managing a little harder. Now it comes to a point where it is extremely hard. That's why you cannot blame these two systems for that, because they were designed to be managed autonomously.
Correct.
These two systems are not supposed to be managed by automated systems and a team. It was supposed to be managed by a set automated system, an autonomous system, and then a team.
Correct.
Right? 3 components, and one component is missing. And to really fix this missing piece, we are developing a lot of tools and adding a lot of people and making their lives hard. So instead, what you have to do is bring that important ingredient here, which is the autonomous system that can now manage it effectively.
Right.
I'll tell you let me give a few examples. Right, VP and HP are like key common use systems that are used in Kubernetes to scale up and down.
Right.
And they work extremely well. Now, managing those VP and HP is the hardest part. So don't try to replace it like some other companies did. Use it. VP and HP should be scaling Kubernetes clusters up. There is absolutely no reason to really replace it, and it is not going to be effective either. What you need is an autonomous system that can handle this VP and HPA.
Right.
The same with serverless. You have infrastructure all managed. Now the configuration of that infra should be managed by an autonomous system, not by people. And these are the small things that will let people focus on the higher order tasks, right? They will start enjoying the work. They can go home. They can take phone calls. They can watch a movie. Come on, right? So that's the idea. That's the whole idea. If you look at SREs, yes, they are trying to run production at time, but you cannot expect them to really live their life and work on this. They have to have their life, enjoy it, and then work on this. That's their job. And that's what they should do. And that's what an autonomous system will let them do.
Well, it actually sounds like music to ears if you're telling that the SREs can also enjoy a movie and do that, because I was in the opinion that SREs are going to be too much on fire and handling those escalations to do it. That sounds to be great. I mean, we also will have a work-life balance is what you're saying based with having with autonomous systems, right? So that's great insight. So let's come to that crux of our conversation today as you start alluding towards autonomous systems. So what does optimizing the SRE production environment with autonomous system mean? I mean, where do you start? Because every organization has already started off in their journey. They have their lights on. They've already started off doing it. So where do you start in the journey? And then if you can show us a little bit of what can be done, that will be really beneficial. Let me know once you want me to add it to the screen.
In fact, let me share my
Should I add it to the
screen.
screen? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Should just check whether you can see my screen on that.
And
there's
you can see my screen, right?
There's one comment from Sri Fani Krishna. He says, "Dream life." If this happened, then the SREs can actually make the world a lot more easier to live in. Absolutely, Sri. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's the idea. So the noise, right? The biggest thing is it is a system that's helping you do that versus a system that's trying to do what you were trying to do. There's absolutely no way you can do that, right? So let me talk. This is Sedai. This is the company that that I was talking about when we started off. What we essentially do is manage two environments: Kubernetes and serverless. And here you can see both the mix being shown. And this is a home screen where we're saying, you know what, we see some problems and we may have to fix it, right? And there are say cases where SLO is not met. And if you look at the screen, there will be some recommendations where the system says, I don't know what to do. There are abnormal patterns.
Right.
And this is exactly where we want SREs to come in and say, yes, now I need to take a look at it. There is a problem. Not when these happen.
Correct.
These are all shown in the platform because for the demo, I just switched it off to autonomously remedied. Otherwise, this will all be autonomously done.
Correct. Meaning, which also means that just on the point where you talked about the autonomous system will take care of the left and right, and they will figure it out. Whatever is needed from their side, they will do it. Where they need some insight from the SRE, that's where they show up. Exactly. So instead of being inundated with tons and tons of alerts that I have, I'll probably focus on the ones that require my attention. The rest of the time, I can focus on something else.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect.
Exactly. Now, if autonomous were turned on, I think it'll only have the abnormal patterns in the screen and probably SLO not met. These are the two things that will be seen on the screen. Otherwise, the rest of the noise is all gone.
Correct.
Let me take you to the optimization directly. So this is a set of Lambda functions. Yes, these are all Lambda functions that got optimized in production all autonomously. So when I say that, I truly mean it. There is absolutely zero manual intervention in this whole flow.
Okay.
Finding the opportunity
where
it's not running optimized, making sure that it can be optimized and confirming the opportunity.
Right.
Running the true optimization, meaning scaling it up.
Right.
And making sure that that scale up really did what it was supposed to do and keeping an eye on it in the subsequent releases. It's all done by the system. Nice. Which means you will stop receiving emails from the developers or the leadership saying, can you optimize your environment to this, right? So that's a common thing, common exercise there. And these are, at one point, when you start optimizing above 50%, for example, you're running a 10 millisecond latency application, now it's down to 1 millisecond. or 5 milliseconds. That's when it stops being just an optimization play. It becomes an availability play.
Right.
Because it was super slow. Now it is a lot faster, right?
Correct.
The latency is now at a point where it can be tolerated.
Correct.
And this is common for almost all microservice environments because there is absolutely no way you can manage all microservices with all the releases that are coming in with all the thresholds.
It's going to be a nightmare. The number of releases that we are doing it, and including with what we talk about Artifactory, it's going to be. I've actually sat in conversations where they don't know. They're doing tons and tons of deployments per day, and the whole point is, as long as nothing is breaking, I'm happy. But if it breaks, then I'm in a deep trouble. So it's always not guaranteed how things work, and it's just like a maze how it operates on a daily basis. So I can very well understand where you come from. Yeah.
Exactly. Now let's take a look at an example as well here. Right. So if you look at the change here, it was pretty simple, right? If you look at the number, the amount of change that the real delta here, it was a few gigs here and there, or a few CPU cores here and there. But you look at the CPU improvement, that is a lot.
Correct.
So this is where you have to strike the right balance. In some cases, you will even save money.
Correct. If you go back to that, I think that's a very interesting point that I want to emphasize. The graph that he showed. So, for example, if you look at this, the memory usage before was 643 meg, and it has moved to 1.23 gig. And the CPU usage before to after is increased by about 90.87%. But also on the top, it talks about the average duration. So what does that average duration and total duration mean after the optimization?
Yes, it is the latency optimization you received after this change.
Right.
And after optimization, how many hours did you save? How many requests did you get, and how many such requests got executed?
Because the reason why I'm asking is that every time we go to the leadership team, they want to showcase the business value. And it's a very difficult conversation to talk about business value without having tangible parameters that we can showcase. So I hope that these dashboards can come in handy for someone who's trying to justify a business case of how this particular tool is helping not only productivity improvement, but also optimizing the whole infrastructure cost that we are incurring, be it on any part of cloud that we are using it. Yeah,
exactly. And it will not do the same for everything. So this will take care of like 80% of your noise out there, in the sense most of your stuff is now right sized, but your databases or connection pooling, right? Those are hard. So you need people to take a look at it. It's just doing that way. You don't have to deal with those emails. That's all, right? So the noise, those things that are hard, that were hard for you to manage, are now autonomously done. And this system, one thing guaranteed is it'll never aggravate the problem at hand.
correct.
It is guaranteed to be safe. That's one of the reasons why Tesla is the safest car in the world.
Right.
You're still autonomous.
Correct. That's definitely. There's one question I wanted to ask. If you bring ITIL best practices into the picture, generally whenever a system is down, you raise an incident, or when it is about to go down. In autonomous systems, if the system fixes itself, do you see a reason for tracking this as an incident, for tracking or any other purpose?
Oh yeah. Yes. Of course, yes. Let me show you that as well. See, whenever we make a change, we file a Jira ticket or a ServiceNow ticket to your system, which means you have all the audit trails for every change we have made.
Right.
So everything is being tracked, because you need to know who has made the change. Changes are still important. You need to have visibility. We also pass it down to your downstream systems in case they want to get a notification. That's where we are integrating with all these guys, including Datadog dashboards. If you have a Datadog dashboard to show the incidents, we will send it to that.
Correct. So Anand, to your question, I just wanted to get to your question and answer it. It makes a lot more sense for us to continue doing this, because one end is we need to know from where does it come from and where does it get tracked? Because later when I do a incident trend analysis, I need to know the source, who was actually instrumental in creating that incident. It's kind of a proactive way of determining this whole exercise. So that way, I think it is not a futile job, and you don't need to create it manually. That's what Suresh Mathew is saying, because it helps you to automatically create a ticket in the model that you need to be available. So that way, it still doesn't take the ownership of an SRE or a service desk or an incident manager to have a look at it, because the system automatically generates, and it's you can view it in terms of what was the reason that the incident was raised and how is it done. So you don't require any manual intervention. Is probably also one of the reasons that we don't need to be worried about it. But it makes absolute sense, like what Suresh said, to have an audit trail of what was the reason that this particular incident was raised.
Yep.
Okay.
And autonomous systems will never be able to find that reason either. That's why I said it is never going to be able to. It is never even. It's not even my dream, or in any autonomous company's dream to really be an SRE in that seat. It can only be a buddy.
Correct.
The good thing is it is a tireless buddy. That's all. It's a system that can run forever. If you take a look at the systems here, right? So we highlight the functions that are constantly getting autonomously changed.
Okay.
So developers can come and say, you know what? Yeah, this release was not good. That is why I'm seeing this problem. Because there could be bugs in there that's causing these restarts, the replaces, the scale ups, right? There could be memory leaks out there. We will give all the things they need to debug during that time, but we will also give them an indication that your application is not running super stable at this point.
Right.
And I also want to bring your attention to the other feature. We call it release intelligence. What we do is we have a gate in your production system. We monitor all the releases that come in. We try to take the first drop of your metric, meaning 10 o'clock you release. We look at the metric from 10 to 10:1. We use that first drop to regress the rest of the data up until 11.
Okay.
We start analyzing how is your release doing? Is it going to break?
Okay.
This is again not a system that will roll back ever. That is again not in the path. The next feature is not rolling back. It is hard. That's why I said an autonomous system can never manage your system properly all by itself. It needs help. Correct. And this is an area where it needs help. It will tell you, yes, I see a problem, and it can be 100% autonomous. It will send you notification as well, but it needs your yes to roll back, because you might change the database along with this. And this is a good example where we saw that, yes, it is. There are some errors. There are no errors, but there is some duration change. Again, it's a shorter duration. Doesn't mean it's always good. It may be skipping some workflow, right? So that's another thing that's out there. The third aspect is the SLOs, where in most other products, SLO is something that you can use to see if you have maintained that SLO, if you have maintained that SLO or not. Meaning, if you have a SLO breach, they will send a notification, or there will be red marks out there. In Sedai, we treat it as a system that you and SREs are maintaining together. In the sense, if there is a breach, we will scale up or scale down or restart or reboot or do whatever possible to get you back to that SLO. Right. So it's not really an SLO that as a report, it is SLO as an active maintained SLO. For instance, when it sees seasonality, it knows that, yes, your release is going to go up. I know what needs to be done here. We will try to keep you under that SLO.
So in fact, what you're saying is that we are here to make you successful to meet your SLOs. So we start gaining that whole traction. We know where you're going to get to be falling short. So we are trying to look at corrective actions and preventive actions to make sure in whatever way we are still able to hit the target of SLO that we committed to your business.
Correct. And here, if you look at, there was an event where it went up. The reason why it was not acting on it, it did not sustain. So it must be, or there could be a chance that I wrote it down.
Right.
So that's generally the idea of SLO management in an autonomous system. That's where it differs. Okay. It's not a scorecard. It's like a game together, right? So we work with the SREs to meet the SLO. not like show the SREs and the management that, you know what, this SLO is not met.
Correct.
That's the biggest difference between an automated system and an autonomous system. It's a buddy for SREs. It's like a little bit our buddy sitting there. If something goes down, he is also responsible for it. If an SLO is not met, he's also responsible for it. So he's never going to come up and say, you know what, I told them, but they didn't do it. Now it is, then they can ask back, right? Why did you not do it?
Correct. So is there any prerequisite, Suresh, to get Sedai in place to manage autonomous systems? There are anything that a company is trying to evaluate on a non-production environment? What do they need to have, or what kind of aspects that we need to think about?
So the onboarding aspect of Sedai is under 5 minutes.
Wow.
We don't deploy an agent, absolutely zero agents on your platform. Your platform stays as secure as it was before.
Sure.
We integrate with your current cloud provider or cluster manager, Kubernetes or AWS or something similar,
right, and
with your monitoring providers to get the data.
Sure.
New Relics, Datadog, Prometheus, AppD. If you find a monitoring provider that's not here and you have that use case, please connect with us. We will be happy to add it.
Sure.
We bring this data together and start figuring out what's going on. The good thing is, as I mentioned, since there is no agent, it's all APIs. So what you essentially give is the secret key and the access key with read-only rights. We go in and start making changes.
So I think that also brings a point of data privacy, and with all this GDPR looming in high, you're saying that we are not exposing us beyond certain things. We just give you that elements through the API call. So the platform that I'm managing from a standpoint with DevSecOps and with this Log4j all looming in, how are we going to manage and maintain for this? Is going to be much more easier.
Yes, and as you can see, we don't connect with your logs at all. The only thing we read is the integers from your environment, the CPU, the memory, the latency, the errors, right? The integers. There is no PII involved. We just read the metrics, and that's all we used to, because it's hard to build the models with non-integers, and it's hard to act with confidence. And you might be throwing an exception because you wanted to debug something, or you may be throwing an exception because there's a real exception. It's hard to figure out.
Correct. Absolutely. Okay, there's a question I just wanted to check. Thank you for sharing your insight about SRE autonomous. Appreciate it, Suresh Mathew. Would you help to share some understanding on breaking point of an autonomous system before the proactive becomes reactive if it is unnoticed?
In fact, excellent question. Let me make sure to take an example here.
Right.
So for an autonomous system to operate well, it has to detect things early. For example, there is going to be a latency problem at 10 o'clock. The system would start noticing some other, we call it lead indicators. We start noticing this lead indicators at 9:30 or 9:40. That's when we start to look for a proactive action to remedy it. Meaning, let's say restart was action, or a replace or a scale up was action.
Right.
And we start doing that even before 10. 10, latency is going to go up. 9:30, we notice this. And let's say that was not fixing the problem. In the sense, as you mentioned, the right use case where it did not work. Okay. You will still get a notification at 9:45, not at 10. So that's where this abnormal notification was showing you, right? So I see some abnormal patterns and I want your help.
Right.
So did we answer the question? So in case if we miss something, you will get a notification much earlier than an automated system in most cases. And as I mentioned, this is not a system that will manage your production autonomously. This is a system that will help you manage your production system with your automated systems a lot more easier.
Correct. No, I think that definitely answers Vinod's question around how things are going to be done. That's awesome. So as people are listening, please feel free to post your questions as we get to that, because I think for us, it's about the conversation that's going to be important. One thing I think it's probably Anand saying that, well, I understand theoretically, but what happens if you have thousands of incidents? Because management may not understand the difference between a genuine incident and incident generated automatically for tracking purposes. So I completely agree, Anand. And And we have spoken in many such situations. Like, so one of the things is you have to. So the system is capable of doing all of those stuff. You decide what the rules are going to look like. So if the business rules are very clear about what, if we agree that the multiple alerts or these things don't require an incident, it's okay. So it's absolutely will boil down to your business rules configuration. That will help us to make that much more easier to manage, right? Any other reports do you think, Suresh, would be important, like from a different stakeholder perspective? Would you suggest what would be a typical stakeholder look like when they want to look at the healthness of the systems and behavior in production? What would you suggest?
Yeah, so we have a few reports coming up. We are also developing reports using a platform.
Mm-hmm.
One thing we generally tell is in most cases, you would not need a lot of reports to show the ROI here. You should see that in the platform itself, but we will categorize it between three things. One, how many availability incidents did we find? How many were auto-remediated? How many were shown? Right. Second is how many were optimized in the last 7 days. Yeah, it's past 7 days. And how many release intelligence scorecards were found. Now you can dig deeper into that and figure out where exactly is optimization, what are the types of applications that we manage. But the idea is, if you were to interact with the system, that means the system is doing something wrong, in other words.
Right. No, I get it. So a little bit about release intelligence. Now, okay, how do I know? Because I do a lot of deployments every day, and how do I understand a little more deeper into where is my release failing, or is that a part of the process failure? Is it something about my pipeline failure? Where do you think I can get a little more insights if something is not the best way to release it? So can you throw some light on the release intelligence?
Yeah, a few things that we do with release intelligence is, one, we give you a trend of all the releases. We give you what exactly are the 4 golden signals, how are they trending in terms of every release. Right. Now, the root cause of the problem is unknown to us. Right? Because we don't see the code. We don't have the text reading. At the same time, we can also tell you soon that this was a check-in that could be a suspect there. Because we see all the check-ins. We are connected to Git as well. When we look at the trend, we can say, you know what? Yeah, this is where that check-in happened, and this could be the suspect there. But that's a max we can say. We do not look at the code.
Right. No, that's a fair point, because we don't have that access to those resources, and how do we get this off the radar?
Yeah.
Perfect. So let's see if we have any other questions. A few questions that I had, and please point towards things. So there was one thing for another user saying, looking at problem management playing a major role where you filter the noise out of automated incidents. There are tools. Of course, I know we're all experts. We understand about difference between incident and problem. I think it's all about making what is more important for the journey that we are in, right? So I also think that one of the things I wanted to ask you, Suresh, is we have been in service management for a long period of time, right? We manage incidents, problem, and other stuff. So what's the gradual evolution for people in service management towards an SRE? Because people think that SRE is the new bandwagon. We all have to jump into this bandwagon. So do you think that there is a shift for people from looking at from ITIL and service management piece towards the scope of site reliability engineering and its impact? Or do you see more people from infrastructure operations and developers interested on these SRE roles?
In fact, both. I would see a lot of people are going to move towards SRE.
Right.
I think LinkedIn itself says the story pretty clearly. They have 212,000 jobs or something when I searched yesterday.
Correct.
Open on the platform. So that's a lot. Correct. And that was just here. Now, if you look at the transition, it's all about what is the profile of the job, right? That's what everybody looks at. And SRE is a fun job. That's the primary reason for people to move in, right? So if you look at SRE as a profile, if you ask anyone, they would want to be an SRE. So that's a role the developers and operations like. And I'll tell you, as I mentioned in the first statement, it is really either a good developer liking operations or a good operations liking software.
Yes.
This is a combination that's coming in. So both will have to come in, and that is going to be the next set of tools and systems that's going to evolve a lot in the next 2-3 years.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think having been doing a lot of consulting on site lab engineering for the last few years, I think there is a huge dearth of talent, but also as we started to look at these moving parts, there is an ecosystem we have to build. As I understand from this, optimizing the true nature of SRE production environment with autonomous systems. Do you also recommend this in your pre-production environments, or are you looking at production environment? Because I'm still sure that a lot of pre-production systems are not a replica of production systems. Forget about the data alone. Just the specs itself is being different. So in terms of testing, Sedai, or optimizing on that, would that be okay to directly do it in production, or do they see something? Sometimes people get a little nervous when it is directly on production. So how do you validate if it's okay to go there and do it in live production, or do you think it's good to start with a pre-production environment, test everything is okay, and then move towards, from a shift perspective, if I want to onboard to a Sedai, what would you recommend?
Yep. Great question. Generally, startups, you will hear a lot of startups saying yes to everything, right? So I think I'm going to take a bold no here.
Sure.
So I'll tell you why I take that, right?
Right.
It is almost not usable in pre-production.
Okay.
You will not really be able to test it a lot in pre-prod.
Okay.
Let's go back and see why there was a pre-prod.
Sure.
I think that's where we should start, right? Why was there a pre-prod?
Right.
In my mind, there is definitely going to be an impedance mismatch between production and pre-prod, whatever you do.
Correct.
The traffic patterns are different. Customer behavior is different. Synthetic transactions and customer transactions cannot even be compared. So the best option for you to test was pre-prod. That's it.
Correct.
Which means there was nothing in production that could do anything for you.
Correct.
That is why there was a pre-prod.
Correct.
Right? And in pre-prod, it also comes with another problem, because in pre-prod, since they know, everybody in pre-prod knows that it's not production. And when they get a number in pre-prod, especially for load and performance, when they get a number saying, I need 10 computes in production, what they do essentially there is double it and push it to production, because they know that even if you regress the data and say in production you would need this, because I know that my numbers would be off, which is correct.
Correct.
He is now forced to give a number, so he'll give a safer number so it doesn't break in production.
Correct.
So if you look at essentially the root cause, one of the root cause for inefficiency was pre-prod.
Correct.
Or load and performance. That was a root cause of inefficiency.
Right.
So in general, this was supposed to be done in production. Now coming back to production, why it doesn't work? We learn a lot from the data that's coming in, the seasonality, the system related data. That's what we learn or feed off of. And those learning is what helps us to make these modifications. And if that richness of data is required for any machine learning model to work, that's why it is hard for us to, and the learning that we have in pre-prod is going to be just washed when you go to production. We don't use it. Correct. So there is not a lot you can test in pre-prod. Now, to answer the other part of the question, where can you test Sedai? Yes, of course. You can push it into prod and say, do not autonomously do anything.
Correct.
Meaning it will not even touch anything. It'll just tell you what it would have done if it was up and running. So you never have to take Sedai and assume that, yes, now it's going to be autonomous. You take Sedai, ask him to drive with you, evaluate it, see if you're happy. If you like it, turn it on. And turning on also, you can do it in phases.
Right.
By operations or by applications. Second, when you have a system that's trying to do something in production, when you see that those actions really resulted in an incident, if not done, you will start liking the system, right? So works for us. And you can also, you have also one more way to guarantee that there won't be any changes. When you give us access rights into your AWS Lambdas or Kubernetes, you can say, do not give the system an access to modify, which means even if we are attempt to do anything, we cannot touch it.
Awesome. So we're on about 7 minutes to go for our final, wrap around. But so what are some of your thoughts around the future for site reliability engineers? Where do you think that they need to focus their energy to build capability? Particularly because when we see a lot of organizations, they are struggling to build capability, and sometimes the SREs are looked at superheroes or heroines. They kind of look at all of the things to be done. So where do you think the site reliability engineers should focus their energies and efforts in becoming better SREs?
Yeah, I think I'll probably go back to the first one. So it is the most important thing today is we have to first accept the fact that things are not the same anymore.
Right.
There are a lot of services, there are a lot of changes, there's a lot of innovation happening,
Correct.
which means we have to kind of agree that some of these technologies will cease to work.
Correct.
We have to now operate on the higher pyramid, right? So you have to go up there and say, you know what, how I can fix this
Right.
clearly. And that I think is where the focus is going to be, figuring out tools that can really help them at this scale, not really tools that will ask them to probably do a lot more
Right.
and operate production. That probably is the most important learning for SR, is to accept the change and make sure that you change your tools and systems to do it. And of course, engineering, coding, making sure that things work in harmony, the right observation, the right numbers, the right reports, all these are going to help. Let me ask you that question back. You've been interacting with a lot of SREs as well, right? What is one thing that they like the most? What is the one thing that they don't like at all? I have an answer to that, but let me hear.
I mean, you've been asking that what do they like about SRE,
I mean,
or
what do they like in their job the most?
okay, sure. I mean, I do a lot of this SRE practitioner series around people. So someone who is very excited about solving problems, that's where SRE really needs to be on crux. I mean, if you don't love to solve problems, then you're in the wrong place, because it's complete unknown unknowns. Let's be honest. It's not known knowns and known unknowns. It's completely unknown unknown. So that means you need to still require to bring in that level of observability, get a 360-degree view, leverage the best of the tools. But I tell people, a fool with a tool is still a fool, right? So you need to really understand how do we look at the whole dynamics, then leverage the best practices from the tool and make it work. So they're really good in problem solving. That's number one. One thing that really I think that they hate is they think SREs are people who would solve all problems. Like they'll become panacea, right? They will solve world hunger. No, it isn't. So they need to be optimally used. I tell people SREs are very costly resources. So you need to sparingly use them where to do it, right? And you can do all the things, but that's not the best use of the SRE. So sometimes the biggest problem I see, Suresh, is that SREs are not being used for the right purposes. And that's something which I think is very, very important for us to understand, right? So if I'm looking at the good thing is about problem solving, the bad thing is that they have not been pulling, doing it with their fullest potential, because organizations do not know how to leverage them in applying it in the right context. So that's the difference between the good and the bad, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, that's in fact I completely agree with the good part. So that's what they like. On the one thing that they don't like that much, in my experience, is this. Okay, and I always see this. Have you been in an incident where developers and SREs are talking? When there's an incident, the problem is developers tend to be a little defensive there.
Correct.
Right, and they can smell it out quickly. They clearly see, okay, so this change is what happened, what caused this, and they want you to be clear on that. They don't want to cover it up. So that's something that I think generally would make conversations easier with SRE teams. That's my take on that.
Absolutely. That's been a delight, Suresh. So for people who are attending this session, I hope you love the session. If you want to know more about Sedai, we will also include that in our link so that you can go there and get to know more about what they do about in the autonomous nature. If you are interested to do your journey towards SRE, you want to know where to start with, we are doing an SRE foundation course as well as the SRE practitioner course. The SRE foundation course is on 15th and 16th and 17th of April. And our SRE practitioner is on April 22nd to 24. So more details will be also brought in as we start to go through it, because this is going to be a journey. We all are here to support you, to make you successful, right? So that's how I think we are going to go and make this work. Thank you so much, Suresh. This has been a fascinating. I'll tell you some of those feedback that we have got. Shivanand Jadhav says, indeed, very well summed up, Suresh Yam, especially the pre-prod needs earlier. Suresh GP, as usual, it's always inspiring to hear you, and even the questions are thoughtful and practical. Thoroughly enjoyed listening to your experts. Thank you so much. Matthew says, good session, Suresh and Suresh. So I think Suresh Square is there. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Shivanand. Thank you. Sri Fani Krishna says, amazing insight, Suresh. So I think it's been a great journey so far. We have been really happy, Suresh. It was like a very good fireside chat. I really love the conversations, very pragmatic of the world to make it work. And I hope that people can take a lot of advantage and go to be better SREs.
Thank you very much, Suresh. In fact, thanks a lot for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed it in and out. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for everyone who tuned in today. And I hope you will enjoy the rest of the day. And we look forward to seeing you in our next LinkedIn Live session. Until then, stay safe and keep learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.